Picture yourself unrolling an ancient map. The parchment is yellowed, the ink faded. Across the vast expanse of Asia, a single name dominates in bold letters: Tartaria. From the Caspian Sea to the Pacific Ocean, from Siberia's frozen forests to the edge of China, a dominion stretches wider than any kingdom you have ever known. Yet only a century or two later, that name is gone. It is erased, replaced by Russia, Mongolia, China, and vague borderlands. A power once certain enough to fill Europe's atlases seems to vanish as though it never existed. Our journey begins not with battles or kings, but with an absence. For 3 centuries, mapmakers from France, Holland, Germany, and Italy sketched Tartaria in vivid colour. They divided it into regions: independent Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Russian Tartary. The detail was consistent and convincing. Why would rival nations agree on such geography unless they believed it real? Yet by the 19th century the name disappears. Not gradually, not debated or revised, but simply scrubbed away. This disappearance raises questions. Was Tartaria a true civilization now forgotten? Was it a cartographer's mistake? Or was it something far more unsettling, a deliberate erasure meant to bury a truth too dangerous to remember? Close your eyes and imagine that landscape. The endless Siberian taiga, pine forests stretching beyond sight. Central Asia, a crossroads of trade where caravans once carried silk and spices. The icy valleys of the Altai, carved long before nations rose. Could an empire have truly ruled such lands, building cities, monuments, and technologies, only to leave behind almost no trace? Some whisper that the traces are not lost, but buried beneath soil and beneath rewritten narratives. History has always been shaped by those who hold the pen. Victors rename cities, redraw maps, and recast memory. Yet Tartaria's erasure feels different. Rome left ruins. Atlantis lives on in legend. Tartaria simply vanishes, as if a curtain were pulled shut and the audience told to forget the play ever existed. To hold one of those old maps is to feel the puzzle's weight. A child in 1600 could grow up believing Tartaria was as real as France or Spain. Their grandchildren in 1700 would find it still marked. But by 1850 the name is gone, absorbed into other labels. How many generations passed without question, never noticing that an empire had slipped through history's cracks? What unsettles most is not the conspiracy itself, but the silence. Civilizations are more than borders. They are languages, songs, prayers, markets alive with trade. If Tartaria was real, where are its voices, its ruins, its chronicles? Some argue they were destroyed or suppressed. Others claim the absence itself is proof that only deliberate erasure could explain such a clean vanishing. Skeptics offer simpler answers. Renaissance cartographers often filled vast unknown regions with assumptions. California appeared as an island for centuries until surveyors corrected it. Could Tartaria have been the same, an oversized label for nomadic tribes repeated until it seemed solid? Perhaps. Yet if so, why the abrupt disappearance? Why no quiet corrections, no footnotes, only silence? And here lies the fascination, the tension between doubt and wonder. Perhaps Tartaria was a myth. Perhaps it was real, a civilization with knowledge beyond our imagining, erased because it threatened the stories of rising empires. If Tartaria could vanish so completely, what else might be missing from the record? What other civilizations may have risen, flourished, and fallen, leaving behind only whispers, anomalies, and fading ink on forgotten maps? Now picture a windswept Siberian plain at dusk. The air is sharp, silence stretches for miles, broken only by the cry of a raven. Beneath your feet perhaps lies the foundation of a city no one remembers. Arches swallowed by soil, windows sealed in mud, stone consumed by time. That is where Tartaria survives. Not in textbooks, but in imagination, in blank spaces of history, in questions that refuse easy answers. Its ghost lingers in maps, in architecture, in our hunger for forgotten ages. So the journey begins with a name that appeared, then vanished. Tartaria, the lost empire, was it myth? Was it truth? Or was it deliberately hidden from us? Tonight we will walk its shadowed borders, guided only by curiosity into the forgotten. Imagine walking through the streets of an old city, Buildings rise around you with ornate stonework, arched windows and doorways that sit strangely low to the ground. Some windows are half buried, their frames at sidewalk level as though the earth itself has risen to swallow them. Descend into a basement, and you may find sealed staircases, bricked arches, or doorways that once opened to the outside world. These are not isolated curiosities. They appear in city after city, from Seattle to Paris, from London to Moscow, from New York to Chicago. To those who believe in the mystery of Tartaria, they are not accidents of construction, but scars left by a single global event. The story is called the Mud Flood. According to the theory, sometime in the 19th century a catastrophe struck. It was not a flood of water, but of earth. The soil turned liquid, sweeping across landscapes and swallowing entire cities in days. Market squares vanished under mud. Avenues became rooftops. Only the highest structures remained visible. Lives, histories, and entire communities disappeared beneath hardened layers of soil. Later generations, unwilling or unaware, rebuilt on top of the buried world. What remains beneath are fragments, silent witnesses to a forgotten age. Seattle still carries traces of this mystery. Beneath its modern streets, visitors walk through glass-roofed tunnels lined with storefronts that once stood at ground level. Windows peer upward from what is now basement walls. Official history tells us the streets were raised after the fire of 1889 to improve sanitation and drainage. Yet for those who follow the mud flood idea, this explanation feels incomplete. They ask why the burial depths are so uniform, why the pattern repeats worldwide, and why the elaborate stonework below seems too refined for what was once considered a frontier town. The same questions surface elsewhere. In New York, subway construction has uncovered vaulted chambers and intricate masonry deep below the streets. In Paris, photographs from the 19th century show buildings whose lower floors are buried beneath new pavements. In London, arched cellars appear to have once been ground floors, now hidden underground. In Chicago, entire streets were razed after the fire of 1871. But believers see this as a cover for something larger. The consistency across continents feels to them like evidence of a pattern that official stories cannot explain. Skeptics respond with practical answers. Cities often raised their levels for sanitation, flood control, or to build new infrastructure. Buried windows and sunken doors are byproducts of urban growth, not sudden catastrophe. Photographs of construction crews and engineering records support this interpretation. Yet even with explanations, the buried facades seem to whisper of something older, something concealed. The emotional force of the mud flood lies in the vision it evokes. Imagine a city alive with markets and carriages. Then, without warning, the ground turns liquid. Streets vanish. Walls sink. Windows disappear beneath a tide of earth. Silence follows, and the city becomes a tomb preserved beneath layers of hardened soil. Above, generations build again, unaware of what lies below their feet. To walk today through a basement window that once opened to daylight is to brush against that silence, to sense the presence of an erased story. Believers of Tartaria see the mud flood as more than geology. In their view, it was an instrument of a great reset, a deliberate act to wipe away a civilization. Some speak of seismic weapons, others of energy discharges from the sky, others still of lost technologies that could liquefy the ground and bury entire cities. Whatever the cause, they see it as a global concealment, a way to erase Tartaria and leave behind only fragments for the curious to find. Critics argue that this is imagination running too far, yet even they admit the imagery is haunting. Photographs of half-buried facades and forgotten doorways leave a lasting impression. The power of the mud flood theory rests in this tension, balanced between rational explanations and the suspicion of something greater. As we move deeper into the mystery, the question lingers. What if the world we see is only the surface, and beneath every city lies another hidden by forces we can barely guess at? What if the basements we enter were once front doors, and every brick holds the memory of a day when the earth itself rose up to erase? Tonight, let this thought rest with you gently. The world above may not be the whole story, Sometimes the ground beneath our feet holds more history than we are taught to believe. If you like this story, feel free to subscribe and stay with us on the next journey. Step into an old building and let your eyes wander upward. Doors rise taller than you can reach. Ceilings stretch far beyond comfort. Staircases climb with steps so steep they feel designed for a stride larger than ours. In opera houses, state capitals and cathedrals across Europe and America, this pattern repeats. Grand structures crowned with domes and arches seem to dwarf the human form. To most, this is the language of architecture, a style meant to inspire awe. To those who follow the mystery of Tartaria, the proportions are not symbolic but practical. They suggest these buildings were created for beings far taller than humans, remembered in myth as giants. Consider the palaces of St. Petersburg, their facades lined with columns that rise like trees. Walk through the great halls of Washington's early Capitol buildings, or the opera houses of San Francisco, rebuilt after disaster, and you find ceilings that soar so high they vanish into shadow. Even furniture from the same periods, preserved in old photographs, sometimes appears oversized, chairs with unusually high seats, tables that stand taller than expected, as though designed for bodies far larger than our own. During the 19th century, newspapers in America occasionally reported discoveries of giant skeletons unearthed in mines or during construction. Bones measuring 7 to 9 feet in length, skulls elongated and massive, teeth said to be as wide as a man's thumb. These reports often disappeared, the remains either lost, sold, or dismissed. The Smithsonian Institution, accused by some of hiding such finds, denies that any exist in its archives. Skeptics argue that most of these accounts were hoaxes, or the bones of animals misinterpreted in a time when science was still young. Yet the persistence of these stories lingers, leaving behind the sense that the world once held beings of a scale beyond our own. The mythology is older still. In the Hebrew Bible, the Nephilim appear as giants who walked the earth before the flood. Greek legend speaks of the Titans who clashed with the gods. Norse sagas describe enormous warriors who strode across the frozen north. Native American traditions tell of red-haired giants living in caves and mounds, wielding tools too large for ordinary hands. Each culture preserves a memory of beings greater than human, builders of monuments that still endure long after their names have faded. If we allow ourselves to wonder, the connection to Tartaria becomes vivid. Could these giants have been the architects of its empire? Could the soaring doors and immense halls be evidence that the world once belonged to a race apart? Step into a cathedral and notice the way sound behaves. Voices carry with strange clarity. Footsteps echo with deep resonance. Music fills the air as though amplified by the stone itself. Some suggest that if giants existed, they may have understood sound in ways we have forgotten. They may have harnessed frequency and vibration as tools, moving stones with harmonics, or using tones for healing. In this view, their architecture was not only about size but resonance. It was designed to harness energy and magnify sound in ways modern builders rarely attempt. Skeptics answer differently. Monumental architecture, they argue, was meant to project power, to humble the individual, to remind citizens of their ruler's authority. Tall doors and wide staircases were symbols, not necessities. As for the skeletons, most can be traced to exaggerated reports, misidentified remains, or sensational tales from an era that thrived on curiosity more than accuracy. Yet even with these explanations, the feeling lingers. Stand before a doorway 15 feet tall, or climb a staircase that demands an unnatural stride, and the sense of mismatch remains. The body feels small, almost out of place, as though the world was not made for it. The idea of giants resonates because it speaks to something within us. It reflects the human need to imagine ancestors greater than ourselves, beings who reached higher, walked further, and left behind works that seem beyond our current reach. Whether literal or symbolic, the image of giants captures wonder. It reminds us that we are heirs to mysteries larger than we can explain. Across continents, the stories persist. In Sardinia, legends tell of enormous builders whose remains lie hidden in caves. In the American Midwest, burial mounds are said to hold bones larger than any human. In Russia, artifacts of oversized armor and weapons appear in museums, often described as ceremonial, yet fitting the stature of warriors 9 feet tall. Each claim may have a simple explanation, but together they form a tapestry that hints at something more. Now picture the grand architecture of the 19th century. Imagine opera houses filled not with ordinary patrons, but with towering figures seated easily beneath the domes. Imagine capitals serving not only governance, but as gathering halls for beings whose steps shook the marble floors. Imagine palaces designed for a people who could raise beams without cranes, who shaped stone as easily as clay. The vision drifts toward fantasy, yet it remains strangely compelling. Perhaps the truth is more subtle. Perhaps giants never walked among us in flesh, but their memory survives in the monuments we build. Architects reach for greatness not by designing for comfort, but for aspiration. They create spaces that make us feel small, so that we might sense the presence of something greater. In that sense, every oversized hall and towering doorway is a monument to giants, not of body but of imagination. Still, the theory of Tartarian giants endures because it satisfies both sides of our nature. The rational mind may dismiss it. The dreaming mind keeps it alive. In the quiet hours, when we close our eyes and drift towards sleep, the thought of giants walking the earth, leaving echoes in stone and legend, feels less like myth and more like a memory waiting to be remembered. Step into a cathedral at dawn. The morning light filters through stained glass, and the silence feels alive. A single note from a choir singer rises, and suddenly the whole space begins to breathe with sound. The walls hum softly, the arches carry the vibration, and the air itself becomes part of the music. This is no accident. The architects of these great structures understood resonance, whether by knowledge or by instinct, and they shaped stone in ways that still astonish us today. For many who explore the mystery of Tartaria, these acoustics are more than artistry. They are evidence of deeper knowledge, a science of sound that modern times are only beginning to rediscover. In this view, the great cathedrals and domed halls were not only places of worship or ceremony, they were instruments of resonance, designed to gather and amplify vibrations, turning music into energy and transforming sound into a tool as powerful as stone itself. Across the myths of creation, sound is linked to power. The world is often said to begin with a spoken word, a vibration that calls matter into form. In India, the syllable Om is believed to carry the vibration of the universe. In the Bible, the walls of Jericho fall when trumpets sound together. In every culture, sound is remembered not only as art but as force. It heals, it breaks, it transforms. Science confirms that sound is vibration, waves moving through air, water, or solid matter. We know it can shatter glass, calm the heart, or arrange grains of sand into intricate shapes. In laboratories, cymatic experiments reveal how tones form hidden geometries in dust or liquid, patterns that seem to echo the designs of nature itself. The ancients may not have used equations, yet they may have known these truths by feel and by art. For some, this is the forgotten knowledge of Tartaria, a mastery of vibration carved forever into stone. Walk beneath the dome of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, and a whisper travels across the chamber. Stand in the whispering gallery of Street, Paul's Cathedral in London, and even the softest word carries across its curve. In temples of India, certain stones ring like bells when struck, their tones rich and resonant. These effects do not appear accidental. They suggest intention, a clear understanding of how to shape materials so that sound flows like water through invisible channels. For believers in Tartaria, resonance was more than beauty. It was power. Some imagine massive stones lifted into place by sound, vibrations loosening gravity itself. Others dream of healing halls where tones restored the body and spirit. In this vision, Tartaria was not a civilization of smoke and engines, but of harmony and resonance, a world tuned to the music of the earth itself. Skeptics insist these claims are speculation. The science of today offers no proof that sound can lift stones or power machines. What we know with certainty is that architects built for awe. High ceilings and domes amplified voices so sermons could reach thousands. Echoing music created reverence, wonder, and a sense of the sacred. In this view, resonance was symbolic, not technological. It was a language of worship, not a hidden source of energy. Yet even with these explanations, the mystery remains. To sit in a cathedral and feel a choir's vibration moving through bone and breath is to sense a power beyond words. To strike a temple stone that rings like a bell is to touch knowledge that feels ancient. Even if the purpose was spiritual rather than mechanical, the mastery is undeniable. How so many cultures, across so many continents, converged on such resonance remains a question without a full answer. There is an emotional weight to this mystery. Sound is memory. A song can bring us back years. A note can move us to tears. If Tartaria understood resonance, then perhaps their monuments are not only stone, but echoes of a world that remembered sound as sacred. Each dome, each arch, each column becomes an instrument, playing a music that continues long after its makers have gone. Imagine a city alive with resonance. Streets paved not only for travel but tuned like strings. Towers built to catch the wind and turn it into tone. Markets where voices carried effortlessly, without shouting. Halls where vibrations healed the body. Squares where harmonics lifted the spirit as surely as sunlight. This vision may be only a dream, yet it feels strangely possible when we listen to what still lingers in stone. Fragments of this dream remain in living traditions. Tibetan monks chant in tones that resonate for minutes after the voice falls silent. Aboriginal Australians play the didgeridoo, its drone said to connect body and land. The Navajo use chants to heal, carrying vibrations as medicine. Everywhere, sound and spirit remain entwined. Perhaps Tartaria was simply another verse in this global song, a civilization that built its cities as instruments of harmony. Skeptics will continue to ask for proof, and perhaps they are right to do so. History demands evidence, but in quiet hours, when we seek not proof but peace, it is enough to listen. To let the echo of stone remind us that sound has always been more than entertainment. It is life's rhythm, the pulse of memory, the thread that binds us to one another. As we drift deeper into this mystery, let the hum of resonance remain with you. Close your eyes and imagine a hall of stone that sings, its arches glowing with the voices of centuries. Perhaps Tartaria has not vanished at all. Perhaps it lingers in every echo, waiting for us to hear. Picture the sky above a 19th century city. The streets below are filled with horses and carts. Gas lamps flicker in the evening air. Yet far above the rooftops, a silent craft drifts across the horizon. It is not a bird, nor a balloon, nor one of the clumsy machines of early inventors. It is something different. Long and sleek, gliding effortlessly, as though powered by an energy we no longer know. For those who follow the mystery of Tartaria, these images are not fantasy. They are fragments of memory, traces of a forgotten age when airships crossed the skies, and the world was lit by free energy drawn directly from the earth and the air. Photographs from the late 19th and early 20th centuries sometimes show strange shapes hovering in the background, dark outlines suspended above cities. Most can be explained as balloons, kites, or even flaws in the film. Yet the imagination sees more. Newspapers of the time occasionally reported mysterious airships. They described cigar-shaped craft that moved silently across towns in the American Midwest, or lingered above villages in Europe. Witnesses spoke of glowing lights, humming sounds, and movements that seemed far too advanced for the technology of their era. The official history of aviation places the first controlled flight in 1903, yet these accounts appear years, sometimes decades earlier. Believers connect these sightings to Tartaria. In their view, such craft were not isolated experiments, but remnants of a global system of travel. The people of Tartaria had mastered flight long before the Wright brothers. They used buoyancy, magnetism, or resonance that we have since forgotten. Their ships were not powered by coal or gasoline, but by free energy drawn from towers and domes that crowned their cities. Look again at the architecture of the 19th century. Many great buildings are topped with domes and spires tipped with metal. Cathedrals, government halls, and train stations rise with peaks that seem to reach for the sky. To believers, these were not only decorative but functional. They gathered atmospheric electricity, storing and distributing it across the city. The light that filled the streets, the hum of unseen power, perhaps even the flight of airships, all came from this hidden river of energy above us. History itself offers echoes of the idea. Nikola Tesla, at the turn of the 20th century, dreamed of transmitting energy wirelessly across the globe. His Wardenclyffe Tower was built to tap into the Earth's resonance and broadcast power without wires. Tesla spoke of a world where anyone could draw electricity from the air, free and abundant. His project was never completed. It was cut short by lack of funding and fear of lost profit. For those who believe in Tartaria, Tesla was not inventing but rediscovering the remains of an older, forgotten technology. Skeptics dismiss these claims. Domes and spires, they argue, were built for beauty, symbolism, or acoustics, not energy. The airships of the 19th century were fragile balloons filled with hydrogen or hot air. The strange photographs and reports, they say, were exaggerations, optical illusions, or the enthusiasm of an age that longed for progress. Free energy remains a dream, unproven and perhaps impossible. Yet the idea lingers because it is alluring. To imagine a world lit without wires, where towers glowed with energy drawn from the sky, is to imagine freedom. To picture silent craft gliding across continents without smoke or fuel is to picture peace. There is comfort in the thought that the earth itself once gave us what we needed, and that people once lived in harmony with its hidden powers. The vision captures longing for a lost golden age. Today, energy is bought and sold, and the skies roar with engines that pollute. The image of a civilization that knew another way, that lit its cities in silence and grace, feels like a promise of what might yet be possible. Imagine walking the streets of St. Petersburg in the late 1800s. Lamps glow without wires, the air hums faintly with vibration. Above you, a silver craft moves silently against the stars. Picture New York not as a city of smoke and steam, but as a place where towers gather energy from the sky, airships dock above rooftops, and the streets are bathed in steady light. Such visions may never have existed, but they leave a powerful imprint on the imagination. Perhaps the truth is less important than the question. Were these airships glimpses of a lost technology, or dreams of an age yearning for wonder? Were the domes machines of power, or monuments of faith? Between skepticism and belief lies a space of possibility, and in that space the mystery of Tartaria continues to breathe. As we drift further into the story, let us hold this thought. The skies may once have carried more than we remember. There may have been a time when energy flowed freely, when silence filled the air, when humanity looked upward, not only to see clouds, but vessels gliding gracefully across the horizon. History is not only about what happened, it is also about what is remembered, recorded, and passed on. For those who explore the mystery of Tartaria, the most unsettling thought is not the empire itself, but its disappearance. An entire civilization may have been erased, not only by catastrophe, but by the deliberate reshaping of memory. This is what they call the reset, a moment when the story of the world was rewritten, a time when the past was swept aside and replaced with a version that served new powers. Look carefully at the 19th century. It was an age of revolutions, industry, and empires in motion. Nations expanded, borders shifted, and old traditions gave way to modern states. It was also the century when Tartaria vanished from atlases, the same century when the mudflood stories placed their catastrophe, the same moment when the world began to embrace a new order of progress. To believers, this was not coincidence. It was a reset, a turning of the page so complete that even the memory of the earlier chapter was torn away. The idea of a reset is powerful because it feels familiar. Each time an empire falls, the victors write their own version of events. Temples are burned, languages silenced, monuments rebranded. Rome absorbed the gods of Greece but gave them new names. Spain built cathedrals over the temples of the Aztecs and the Maya. Dynasties in China erased records of rivals to strengthen their claim to the mandate of heaven. History is always a struggle over memory. Yet in the case of Tartaria, the erasure seems total. Only faint traces remain, in maps, in architecture, in whispers. Skeptics argue that no conspiracy is required. As explorers charted Asia, the word Tartary became obsolete. It was replaced with the more precise names of Russia, Mongolia, and Central Asia. As cities expanded, older layers of architecture were buried or repurposed, leaving the appearance of a reset where none existed. To them, the disappearance is the natural evolution of knowledge. But for those who believe, The explanation feels too tidy. They see not correction, but concealment. Imagine how a reset might unfold. An empire collapses through disaster, war, or design. Survivors scatter, their knowledge broken, their monuments hidden beneath soil. New rulers rise and take control of the narrative. Maps are redrawn, textbooks rewritten. The next generation grows up never knowing what came before. Within a single lifetime, the memory of a civilization can vanish. By the time grandchildren ask questions, there is only silence. Echoes of this exist in our own time. Consider how quickly the digital world changes. Websites vanish, archives disappear, photographs are lost when servers close. Already, fragments of our recent history can no longer be recovered. If erasure is so easy today, how much simpler could it have been in the 19th century, when literacy was rare, communication slow, and authority concentrated in the hands of a few? The emotional pull of the reset theory lies in the question of trust. If history can be rewritten, how much of what we know is secure? How many stories are missing? How many voices have been folded into silence? To believe in Tartaria is to believe that the reset was not only an event of the past, but also a reminder that memory itself is fragile. What we accept as fact may be only one version of many. Skeptics remind us that continuity does exist. Records survive, artifacts endure, chronicles remain from every century. Yet even they admit that history is selective. Archives are curated. Stories are emphasized or diminished according to the needs of the present. The reset theory may exaggerate this truth, but it also reflects it. Whether Tartaria was real or imagined, the erasure of memory is a habit as old as humanity. Imagine a great library filled with scrolls and books. Somewhere inside lies the record of a forgotten empire. Then picture flames consuming the shelves, or orders given to clear them away. Within hours, the memory is gone. The burning of the Library of Alexandria is the most famous example, but it is not the only one. Countless records have been destroyed, and with them, entire worlds of knowledge. If Tartaria's history was ever written, it may have suffered the same fate, leaving behind only fragments and speculation. What we inherit is not the whole story, but only the pieces allowed to remain. Whether Tartaria was fact or fiction, its mystery reminds us that forgetting can be as powerful as remembering. Silence often shapes the story more than words. In the 19th century, a strange movement unfolded across America. From the crowded cities of the East, trains began to roll westward. They carried not goods, not settlers, but children. They were called orphan trains. Between the 1852nd and the 1922nd, they transported more than 200,000 boys and girls into the towns and farmlands of the frontier. Official history tells us this was a humanitarian project, meant to give abandoned children a chance at new lives. Yet for those who believe in the mystery of Tartaria, these trains carry a darker echo. They see them not as charity, but as evidence of a reset, an effort to repopulate lands emptied by catastrophe, and to erase the memory of a civilization now lost. The story begins in New York, Boston, and other great cities, where poverty left thousands of children homeless. Orphanages overflowed. Reformers worried about disorder. The solution they offered was simple. Gather the children, place them on trains, and send them west to families who would take them in. Posters advertised their arrival. Crowds gathered at stations to choose. Some children were welcomed with care. Others were taken as farm labour. For decades, the trains scattered young lives across a nation still being shaped. To mainstream historians, this was a reflection of social reform. It was not perfect, and often cruel, but it was part of the effort to manage the upheavals of immigration, poverty, and urbanization. For Tartarian theorists, however, the numbers raise unsettling questions. 200,000 children is not a small figure. It suggests a movement on a scale difficult to explain as simple charity. Where did so many orphans come from? Why were their origins so vague, their records incomplete, their pasts so easily erased? Some believe these children were survivors of a reset. If cities had been buried or civilizations destroyed, the young would have been left wandering without families. Remnants of a world swept away. The trains then were not compassion, but logistics. a system to redistribute populations while severing all ties to the past. By giving children new families, new names, and new lives, the link to what came before was broken. Within a single generation, the memory of the old world would vanish. The pattern extends beyond America. In Europe, vast numbers of children were relocated after wars, epidemics, or disasters. In Australia, children from Britain were shipped overseas to populate the colonies. In Russia, stories speak of children gathered into state institutions, later dispersed without their pasts. To believers, this repetition suggests coordination, a global method of reshaping societies after catastrophe, carried out quietly, without explanation. Skeptics reply that these were the harsh realities of the age. Families were broken by disease, migration, and poverty. Orphanages were full. Relocation was one of the few solutions reformers could imagine. The suffering was real, but it was born of hardship, not of hidden resets. Yet even skeptics admit the orphan trains leave a haunting impression. The image of children lined up at stations, waiting to be chosen by strangers, speaks of uprooted lives, broken identities, memory dissolved. Emotionally, the story resonates because it touches something deeply human. A child depends on care and memory to shape identity. To be placed on a train, separated from everything familiar, is to lose that memory. For those who see Tartaria in this story, the orphan trains become a metaphor for history itself. A civilization can be placed on a train, scattered across the future, until no one remembers where it began. Accounts from the children survive in letters and memoirs. Some recall finding kindness and building new lives. Others remember loneliness, exploitation, and growing up without their true names. In either case, the past was gone. What remained was survival. In that sense, the orphan train succeeded. They created futures, but they did so at the cost of forgetting. Picture a station in the late 1800s. The whistle of the train echoes across the platform. Steam clouds rise as dozens of children stand with small bundles in hand. Their faces are solemn, their eyes wide. Townspeople gather, choosing who to take home. A boy is picked for his strength, a girl for her quietness. Others wait, uncertain if anyone will claim them. By nightfall they are scattered, never to see one another again. Their past dissolves with the sound of the departing train. For those who believe in Tartaria, this was not reform. It was a reset carried out quietly, not through fire or ruin, but through the relocation of children. Within decades, they grew into adults with new names, their origins erased as surely as maps redrawn. Whether one accepts the theory or not, the orphan trains remind us of the fragility of identity. We are shaped by memory, by family, by the stories passed down to us. Strip those away, and we are left like the children on the trains, carrying only fragments into an unknown future. As the train vanishes into the dark, the thought remains. Perhaps history itself moves the same way. We travel forward, carrying what we can, leaving behind what we cannot keep. And sometimes what is left behind is an entire civilization, dissolved into silence. At the turn of the 20th century, cities across the world erupted in festivals of light and spectacle. They called them World's Fairs, great expositions meant to celebrate progress and invention. Paris dazzled with the Eiffel Tower and thousands of electric lamps glowing against the night. Chicago's White City rose along the lakefront, filled with luminous palaces. Louis, San Francisco, London, and others unveiled pavilions, domes, and arches that seemed conjured from another age. To the millions who attended, they were wonders of the modern world. Yet for those who believe in Tartaria, they were something else entirely. They were not new achievements, but remnants of a forgotten civilization, briefly revealed, then erased. The photographs of these fairs seem almost unreal. Towering palaces with colonnades as grand as Rome, vast domes rivaling the Pantheon, waterways lined with marble bridges, and plazas of perfect symmetry. According to official accounts, these cities of wonder were built not over decades, but in mere months. They were said to be temporary structures of plaster painted to look like stone, designed to impress and then dismantled. Yet when visitors walked among them, They felt as solid and permanent as ancient monuments. To believers in Tartaria, the idea that such grandeur was only plaster feels unconvincing. They argue that the fairs were not created from nothing, but uncovered. Remnants of an older world, repainted and rebranded before being destroyed. The building and demolition became, in this view, a ritual of concealment. A way to display the beauty of the old order one final time, before ensuring it vanished forever. Consider Chicago in 1893. The Columbian Exposition stretched across more than 600 acres. It was filled with palaces, lagoons, statues, and monumental halls. Within a year, almost all of it was gone, dismantled or consumed by fire. Only fragments remain today. Official explanations describe wood and plaster meant only for spectacle. Yet the eye lingers on the scale, the detail, the majesty that seemed designed to last. The same pattern repeated worldwide. In Paris, London, Street Louis, San Francisco, whole cities appeared almost overnight. For a season they glowed, inspiring awe, and then they were erased. If they were meant to be temporary, why invest such artistry? Why create domes that lifted spirits and plazas that seemed eternal only to tear them down? To believers, the answer is clear. These were not showcases of progress, but echoes of Tartaria, brought briefly into view, then buried again in silence. Skeptics counter that the truth is simpler. The fairs were symbols of ambition. They were stages for nations to display their power, illusions built cheaply but designed to impress. Grand facades of plaster and wood, dazzling by day and glowing by night, served their purpose. When the fairs ended, there was no reason to preserve them. In this view, the only mystery lies in human ambition, not in forgotten empires. Yet photographs still carry a weight that explanations cannot erase. To look upon the White City is to feel as though one has entered a dream. The shimmering water, the glowing colonnades, the statues rising above promenades. Visitors wrote that they were overwhelmed, not by machines, but by beauty. It was a place that felt timeless, as though it belonged to another world. For those who believe in Tartaria, that recognition is the key. The fairs felt familiar because they echoed a civilization that had once existed and was now forgotten. Imagine yourself at one of these fairs. The night hums with light, electric lamps blaze like stars, fountains leap into coloured fire. Crowds wander along the promenades, their voices mingling with the swell of music. Above it all, towers and domes rise into the sky, serene and immense. Too vast to belong to a world that built them in months. The air itself seems filled with memory, as though the city remembers a time when it was not a fairground, but a living capital. The mystery of the fairs is not only about their construction or destruction, it lies in the feeling they leave behind. Why do we sense loss when we look at them? Why do they trouble us, as though something precious was taken away? Perhaps because they remind us of how fragile memory is. A city can rise and vanish in a season. Within a generation it becomes a photograph, then a faint story, then silence. If Tartaria ever existed, perhaps its end followed the same rhythm. The world's fairs were celebrations of progress, but they were also rituals of impermanence. Build, display, destroy, forget. In this rhythm lies the heart of the Tartarian mystery. Whether the fairs were plaster illusions or fragments of a vanished world, they remind us that beauty can disappear swiftly, leaving only echoes. As we rest with these images, let us carry the thought that somewhere within the lights and vanished palaces, we glimpse more than spectacle. We glimpse memory, a memory of a world that may yet linger in stone, in silence, and in us. In many ancient traditions, there are stories of forces so destructive that they appear again and again across religions and myths. The Bible speaks of Gog and Magog. The Quran also describes them as nations that bring ruin to the world. Some describe them as wild tribes, others as giants, and still others as beings not entirely human. For believers in the mystery of Tartaria, these ancient names are not only prophecy but history. They see Gog and Magog not as distant legends, but as the very forces that brought Tartaria to its end. According to this view, Tartaria was not defeated by ordinary armies. It fell to invaders who came from beyond, forces that seemed more like demons or even travelers from another dimension. The idea is not as strange as it first sounds. Across the world, there are myths of portals and gates, of enemies arriving suddenly through openings in the sky or in the earth. Believers say that Tartaria may have faced just such a breach. One of the strangest events of modern history is the Tunguska explosion of 1,908-inch Siberia. Officially, it was explained as a meteor that exploded before hitting the ground, flattening forests for hundreds of miles. Yet no crater was ever found. For those who link the event to Tartaria, the Tunguska blast was not a meteor at all, but a weapon. They imagine it as the remnant of the same forces that destroyed Tartaria long before, an echo of Gog and Magog's technology, capable of fire from the sky. Legends tell us that Gog and Magog were locked away behind a barrier, a wall of iron said to have been raised by Alexander the Great to protect the world. But what if that barrier was not a simple wall of stone and metal? What if it was a kind of energy gate, a stargate holding back forces from another realm? If Tartaria inherited or guarded this barrier, then its fall might have come when that gate was broken. The invaders would not have come with ships or horses, but with light, fire, and machines far beyond our understanding. For skeptics, this is only a myth given new life. They explain Gog and Magog as symbols of chaos, enemies used in religious texts to warn of moral decline and coming disaster. Tartaria, to them, was never an empire, only a label on maps that faded with better knowledge of geography. The Tunguska event, they insist, was simply nature, a meteor, nothing more. Yet even skeptics admit that myths have power, and sometimes power hides fragments of memory. To those who believe, Tartaria's fall fits the prophecy. An empire that spanned half a continent, erased so completely that even its name was removed from maps, could only have fallen to something more than war or famine. Gog and Magog, unleashed at last, may have swept across its lands. Survivors scattered, children placed on orphan trains, maps redrawn, histories rewritten. What remained was silence. The emotional weight of this idea is difficult to ignore. It suggests that humanity's greatest dangers are not only natural disasters or human wars, but forces beyond us, forces that legends tried to describe in the only language they had. Giants, demons, invaders from the ends of the earth. Perhaps Tartaria's last task was to hold that barrier, and when it failed, the world we know was born from its ashes. Imagine for a moment the last days of Tartaria. The sky darkens with strange fire. Cities tremble as if the earth itself is breaking apart. People flee, but there is no escape, for the enemy is not an army one can fight, but a storm of light and destruction pouring from a broken gate. The survivors do not write books. They do not leave monuments. They only leave fragments, scattered myths, whispers of Gog and Magog, carried into the future as warnings. Whether one believes or not, the story of Gog and Magog gives Tartaria's fall a sense of epic tragedy. It ties the empire not only to the past, but to the future. For both the Bible and the Quran say that Gog and Magog will return at the end of days. If they destroyed Tartaria once, perhaps they will rise again. And if so, then the mystery of Tartaria is not just about what was lost, but about what may come. Tartaria is often spoken of as if it belongs only to the past, a forgotten empire erased from maps and memories. But what if its greatest secret is not in how it disappeared, but in how it might return? For centuries, legends have told of civilizations that fall only to rise again, carried by prophecy, by cycles of time, or by knowledge hidden away until the world is ready. Perhaps Tartaria is one of these. Ancient traditions across the globe speak of golden ages that do not truly end, but sleep. In Hindu cosmology, the yugas mark vast cycles of human rise and decline. In Buddhist texts, Shambhala waits in silence until a new age begins. In medieval Europe, prophets told of lost kingdoms that would reawaken in times of crisis. To some, Tartaria belongs to this pattern. Its absence may not be permanent, it may be waiting. Signs of return are not sought only in prophecy, but in the earth itself. Across Siberia, Central Asia, and the Arctic, climate change has begun to thaw the ground. Entire forests, frozen animals, and long-buried structures emerge from the ice. Archaeologists and explorers alike admit that the coming decades will reveal landscapes unseen for thousands of years. What if beneath that ice lie cities, halls, or vaults, fragments of a civilization that did not end but was buried? The land may be keeping Tartaria in trust, holding it until humanity is ready once more. Some say the return will not be physical, but spiritual and intellectual. The dream of limitless energy, of harmony between architecture and nature, of societies bound together, not by conquest, but by resonance, continues to stir within our culture. Inventors experiment with atmospheric power. Artists recreate monumental designs. Thinkers call for new ways of living that echo with older wisdom. The world we are building today may be preparing the ground for Tartaria's reappearance. Perhaps it is not a matter of stones rising, but of ideas awakening. Others imagine a more dramatic return. Texts from both East and West speak of upheavals, of gates opening between worlds, of veils between dimensions lifting at appointed times. If Tartaria was not simply an empire of stone, but a civilization attuned to forces beyond our present science, then its disappearance might not be the end, but the closing of a door. And when that door opens again, its presence may not be subtle. The return could arrive like a tide, reshaping memory, history, and destiny at once. Whether subtle or sudden, the thought of return gives the mystery of Tartaria a new weight. It means we are not only asking about the past, but also about the future. What if our descendants will not speak of Tartaria as a legend, but as a reality that came back when the world was ready? Imagine the moment. A century from now, explorers break through ice and stone to reveal halls filled with light, technologies humming after ages of silence. Or perhaps it happens more quietly, through the rediscovery of principles that allow us to power our world differently, to build differently, to live differently. However it comes, the return would not only restore what was lost, it would change what we believe possible. Skeptics see only longing in these ideas, a human desire to believe in what cannot be proven. Yet even skeptics must admit that history is filled with rediscoveries. Cities thought to be myth, like Troy, rose again from the soil. Languages once forgotten have been pieced back together. The line between legend and history is never as firm as we think. If it has happened before, why not again? And so, as we close this journey, let us leave with a thought not of endings but of beginnings. Tartaria may have been erased, but erasure is not the same as destruction. What is forgotten can be remembered. What is buried can rise. What is silent can speak again. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to support the channel and to keep new videos coming. Good night.